Blake Lively had spent nearly 2 decades as one of Hollywood's most recognizable actresses. Justin Baldoni was best known for his role in Jane the Virgin before moving behind the camera, eventually acquiring the film rights to Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel It Ends With Us and directing its adaptation. What began as one of Hollywood's most anticipated book-to-screen projects would eventually become one of the entertainment industry's most closely watched legal battles. Over the months that followed, the case grew far beyond a dispute between an actress and a director. Lawsuits were filed, private text messages became public, behind-the-scenes footage was released. Publicists, crisis management firms, journalists, and some of Hollywood's biggest names found themselves drawn into the story. Every new court filing seemed to answer one question while raising several more. To understand how it reached that point, we have to start years before the first lawsuit was ever filed. Justin Baldoni's production company, Wayfarer Studios, acquired the film rights to Colleen Hoover's novel It Ends With Us. First published in August 2016, the book tells the story of Lily Bloom, a young woman whose seemingly perfect relationship forces her to confront the cycle of domestic abuse she witnessed as a child. Inspired in part by Hoover's own family experiences, the novel quickly found an audience and steadily climbed bestseller lists. Then came book talk. Beginning in 2020, readers on TikTok transformed It Ends With Us into a cultural phenomenon. Millions of videos recommended the novel, emotional reaction clips spread across the platform, and sales exploded. The book spent well over 100 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list, sold millions of copies worldwide, and became one of the defining publishing success stories of the decade. Interest in the film adaptation grew just as quickly. Fans debated dream casting online, dissected every rumor, and closely followed updates from Colleen Hoover and Wayfarer Studios. By the time official casting announcements arrived, expectations were already enormous. Blake Lively announced that she had been cast as Lily Bloom. The following day, Justin Baldoni confirmed that he would not only direct the film, but also portray Ryle Kincaid. In the weeks that followed, Brandon Sklenar joined the cast as Atlas Corrigan, alongside Jenny Slate, Hassan Minhaj, Amy Morton, and Kevin McKidd. The casting immediately sparked debate. Many readers praised the performances they imagined the cast could deliver. Others questioned whether the actors reflected the ages described in the novel, particularly Lively, whose casting became one of the most discussed topics across TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, and YouTube. Even before a single scene had been filmed, It Ends With Us had become one of the year's most talked about productions. Principal photography began across New Jersey. Film crews transformed neighborhoods into locations from the novel. Local businesses closed temporarily as streets filled with production trucks, lighting rigs, and camera equipment. Fans gathered outside filming locations, hoping to catch a glimpse of the cast, while behind-the-scenes photographs spread rapidly across social media. Every new image generated thousands of comments from readers comparing the adaptation to the version they had imagined while reading the book. From the outside, production appeared to be progressing like any other major studio film. The cast continued filming throughout the summer. Sony Pictures prepared for a theatrical release, and anticipation surrounding the adaptation continued to build. Away from the cameras, however, disagreements were beginning to emerge. Those disagreements would later become the foundation of everything that followed. As filming continued through the summer of 2023, It Ends With Us remained one of Sony Pictures' highest-profile productions. From the outside, there was little indication that anything was wrong. New set photos continued to circulate online, Colleen Hoover occasionally shared updates with fans, and anticipation for the adaptation continued to grow. Behind the scenes, however, the experience each side would later describe looked very different. According to Blake Lively's later legal filings, tensions developed during production over both workplace conduct and creative decisions. She alleged that Baldoni's behavior on set made her uncomfortable, and that several incidents eventually led to formal discussions involving producers and studio representatives. Baldoni has denied those allegations. His legal team argues that many of the disagreements centered on the creative direction of the film rather than inappropriate conduct. Court filings describe ongoing debates over dialogue, wardrobe, scenes, character development, and the overall tone of the adaptation. Baldoni maintains that many of the changes requested during production fundamentally altered the film he originally intended to make. One meeting would later become particularly significant. According to Lively's complaint, a meeting hearing was held during production to address concerns she had raised. The complaint states that representatives for Sony, Wayfarer Studios, and members of the production team were present. Lively alleged that several requests were made during that meeting, including changes to working conditions for the remainder of filming. Baldoni's legal team disputes key aspects of that characterization and argues that later evidence presents a different picture of what occurred before and after the meeting. Because the case remains ongoing, many of those competing claims have yet to be tested in court. Production ultimately continued. By early 2024, filming had wrapped and attention shifted toward post-production. Editors assembled the final cut, marketing campaigns began taking shape, and Sony scheduled the film for a nationwide theatrical release on August 9, 2024. For fans of the novel, excitement only continued to build. The first trailer attracted millions of views within days of its release. Promotional posters appeared in theaters across the United States. Entertainment outlets published interviews with the cast, while Colleen Hoover promoted the adaptation across her social media platforms. Everything about the campaign suggests that the studio believed it had a major hit on its hands. Then the press tour began. Almost immediately, viewers noticed something unusual. Although Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni had made a film together, they were rarely seen promoting it together. Baldoni attended separate interviews. Lively appeared alongside other cast members without him. At premieres and promotional events, fans began questioning why the film's director and leading actress were almost never photographed together. Neither addressed the speculation publicly. Instead, both focused on different aspects of the film. Lively spoke about Lily Bloom's resilience, fashion, and hope, while also promoting her newly launched haircare brand, Blake Brown, during several appearances. Baldoni's interviews centered almost entirely on domestic violence, emotional trauma, and the responsibility of adapting a story that meant so much to readers. The contrast didn't go unnoticed. Across TikTok, Reddit, X, and YouTube, viewers began comparing interviews side by side. Some questioned whether the cast had been instructed to avoid discussing Baldoni. Others believed the separate promotional schedules meant nothing at all. At the time, there were no public allegations. Only questions. Within weeks, those questions would be answered in a way almost no one expected. After years of development, It Ends With Us finally arrived in theaters. The adaptation opened to more than $50 million at the domestic box office during its first weekend, making it one of Sony Pictures' strongest theatrical releases of the summer. Despite mixed reviews from critics, audiences turned out in large numbers, driven by Colleen Hoover's massive fan base and years of anticipation surrounding the adaptation. With the film now in theaters, the promotional campaign continued. Blake Lively appeared on national television, entertainment programs, podcasts, and red carpets speaking about Lily Bloom's journey while simultaneously introducing audiences to Blake Brown, her new haircare brand, which launched during the same period. Betty Buzz, the beverage company she co-founded, also featured prominently throughout the press tour, with branded events and cross-promotion accompanying many of her public appearances. The marketing strategy quickly became part of the conversation. Several entertainment publications questioned whether the campaign reflected the subject matter of the film. It Ends With Us is built around domestic violence and emotional abuse, yet many interviews focused on fashion, flowers, beauty products, and lifestyle. One moment in particular spread rapidly online after Lively encouraged audiences to grab your friends, wear your florals, and go see the movie. As those clips circulated, another video unexpectedly returned to public attention. In August 2024, Norwegian entertainment journalist Kjersti Flaa republished an interview she had conducted with Lively 8 years earlier during the press tour for Cafe Society. Flaa titled the video, "The Blake Lively Interview That Made Me Want to Quit My Job." The interview immediately gained traction. Viewers who had never seen the 2016 exchange watched it through the lens of the ongoing It Ends With Us press tour. Within days, the clip had accumulated millions of views, prompting media outlets and online creators to revisit other interviews from across Lively's career. Soon, television appearances, red carpet interviews, and promotional clips spanning more than a decade were being compiled into long-form videos across YouTube, TikTok, and X. Entertainment commentators examined everything from interviews interview responses to body language, while older moments that had received little attention when they originally aired were suddenly being discussed by millions of people. The conversation surrounding Blake Lively was no longer centered on a single movie. It had expanded into a broader reassessment of her public image, with every new clip generating another round of headlines and commentary. Away from the cameras, however, something far more consequential was unfolding. Lawyers representing both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni were preparing for a legal battle that would soon move the story from entertainment pages to court filings. December 20, 2024 was less than 4 months away. More than 4 months after It Ends With Us premiered, Blake Lively filed a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, accusing Justin Baldoni of sexual harassment and retaliation during the film's production. Lively also alleged that after production ended, Baldoni and members of his team coordinated an effort to damage her reputation if she publicly discussed her experience. The filing referenced internal text messages obtained through a subpoena, including conversations involving publicists and crisis communication specialists. According to the complaint, those messages outline strategies for influencing online conversations and responding to negative publicity. Hours after the complaint became public, the New York Times published an investigation titled "We Can Bury Anyone: Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." Drawing on the complaint and supporting documents, the article detailed the alleged communications between Baldoni's publicity team and described what Lively claimed was a coordinated campaign to discredit her before she could speak publicly. The story immediately dominated entertainment news. Major outlets including Variety, Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter, CNN, NBC News, and ABC News published extensive coverage as the allegations spread far beyond Hollywood trade publications. Within hours, the dispute had become one of the entertainment industry's biggest stories of the year. Support for Lively followed quickly. Colleen Hoover publicly expressed her support, calling Lively honest, kind, supportive, and patient. Cast members including Jenny Slate, Brandon Sklenar, and Hassan Minhaj also released statements backing Lively, while SAG-AFTRA praised her for coming forward and reaffirmed its support for performers reporting workplace misconduct. By the end of the day, the conversation surrounding It Ends With Us had fundamentally changed. The questions were no longer about the film's marketing campaign or the press tour. They were about what had happened behind the scenes and whether the allegations described in Lively's complaint could be proven. Justin Baldoni denied the allegations. His response would arrive less than 2 weeks later. Through his attorney, Brian Friedman, Baldoni denied Blake Lively's allegations in their entirety, calling the complaint false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious. He argued that Lively's claims were designed to repair her public image following months of negative press surrounding the film's release. The legal battle escalated again on December 31st, 2024. Baldoni filed a $250 million libel lawsuit against the New York Times, accusing the newspaper of relying almost entirely on Lively's version of events while ignoring evidence that contradicted her allegations. The lawsuit claimed the paper had presented a misleading account of the dispute by selectively quoting private communications and omitting context that, according to Baldoni, would have changed readers' understanding of what had occurred. The Times stood by its reporting. A spokesperson for the newspaper said the investigation was based on thousands of pages of documents, including text messages and emails, and stated that it intended to defend its journalism in court. Just weeks later, the dispute expanded even further. On January 16, 2025, Baldoni filed a $400 million lawsuit in federal court against Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, publicist Leslie Sloan, and Sloan's PR firm Vision PR. The complaint accused Lively of attempting to take creative control of It Ends With Us during production before launching what Baldoni described as a coordinated effort to remove him from his own film. According to the lawsuit, Reynolds confronted Baldoni during a meeting at the couple's New York home, while Lively used her influence to pressure both Sony Pictures and distributor executives during post-production. Baldoni's filing also challenged the allegation that a coordinated online smear campaign had been orchestrated against Lively. His legal team argued that the communications referenced in her complaint reflected ordinary crisis management discussions between publicists responding to a rapidly developing media story rather than a deliberate attempt to destroy her reputation. Then came an unusual move. Rather than relying solely on court filings, Baldoni's legal team launched a dedicated website containing documents they argued supported his defense. The site included text message exchanges, emails, production schedules, and other materials referenced in the lawsuit, allowing journalists and the public to examine many of the documents for themselves. Among the materials released were conversations between Baldoni and Lively discussing revisions to scenes, production logistics, and creative decisions. Baldoni's attorneys argued that the messages showed a collaborative working relationship that conflicted with the picture presented in Lively's complaint. The release of those documents reignited the debate online. Supporters of both sides began examining individual text messages, comparing timelines, and offering competing interpretations of the same evidence. Entertainment lawyers, public relations experts, and former studio executives weighed in across television and social media, with many cautioning that isolated messages rarely tell the full story without broader context. For the first time since the dispute became public, both sides had laid out detailed and sharply conflicting versions of the same events. The case was no longer being fought only through headlines. It was now unfolding simultaneously in courtrooms, legal filings, and the court of public opinion. The most surprising names connected to the dispute, however, had yet to enter the story. As the lawsuits moved through the courts, the dispute expanded well beyond Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. One of the first new names to emerge was Ryan Reynolds. In Baldoni's lawsuit, Reynolds was accused of confronting him during a meeting at the couple's New York apartment and pressuring him over Lively's concerns during production. The complaint also claimed that Reynolds mocked Baldoni through the character Nice Pool in Deadpool and Wolverine, alleging that the character was intentionally written as a parody of him. Reynolds has denied those allegations and has sought to have the claims against him dismissed. Then another celebrity became part of the story. Taylor Swift's name appeared in Baldoni's complaint after he alleged that Lively referred to Reynolds and Swift as two of her dragons while discussing script revisions. Baldoni claimed the reference was meant to illustrate the level of influence surrounding Lively during creative discussions. Swift was never accused of wrongdoing. Her representative stated that she had no creative involvement in It Ends With Us beyond licensing one of her songs for the film, and characterized attempts to draw her into the dispute as unfounded. As discovery progressed, both legal teams continued requesting documents, communications, and testimony they believed would support their respective cases. Court filings addressed issues ranging from text message preservation and document production to disputes over what evidence should ultimately be presented at trial. Outside the courtroom, neither side backed away from its position. Lively maintained that she was subjected to sexual harassment and later became the target of a coordinated retaliation campaign after raising concerns during production. Baldoni continued to deny those allegations, insisting that the evidence would demonstrate his actions were being misrepresented and that the claims against him were false. The litigation has remained active, with judges overseeing procedural disputes while attorneys for both sides continue preparing their cases. Motions have been argued, evidence has been contested, and portions of the lawsuits have been challenged, but the central allegations remain unresolved. What began with the adaptation of a best-selling novel has evolved into one of Hollywood's most closely watched legal battles, raising broader questions about workplace conduct, the role of crisis public relations, and how disputes can unfold simultaneously in courtrooms, newsrooms, and across social media. For now, the competing narratives remain exactly that, competing narratives. A jury has not determined whether Blake Lively's allegations are true. A jury has not determined whether Justin Baldoni's counterclaims have merit. Until that happens, the documents, interviews, text messages, and public statements represent the arguments of two opposing sides in a case that is still working its way through the legal system. And for a film that set out to tell a story about surviving abuse, its legacy may ultimately be defined not by what audiences watched on screen, but by everything that happened after the camera stopped rolling. When It Ends With Us premiered in August 2024, it was expected to be remembered for bringing one of the decade's best-selling novels to the big screen. Instead, the film became overshadowed by the events that followed. Court filings replaced movie reviews, interviews became evidence, headlines shifted from the performances on screen to the allegations, lawsuits, and competing claims made by the people behind the film. The legal battle continues to evolve. In the latest development, Justin Baldoni has asked a federal judge to reject or significantly reduce Blake Lively's request for nearly $7.5 million in attorney's fees, arguing that the amount claimed is excessive and unsupported. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines. We break down the controversies, scandals, and untold stories behind the world's biggest names. Thanks for watching.